You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the Next Generation episode, The Price. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Jason Tyler. Hey, Father.
Hello.
And Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, be sure to stick around. We have some of your listener feedback this time on our discussion of the new Section 31 movie. And I also want to tell you about the opportunity to get your very own Secrets of Star Trek t-shirt or other merchandise we have at our merchandise store at sqpn.com/merch. So now we're talking about The Price, which is a third season story. I think it is. I didn't look that up. We're talking about third season TNG. And so, Jimmy, could you give us a recap of what happens in The Price?
So this week, an evil manipulator with telepathic abilities comes aboard the Enterprise and manipulates Deanna Troi. She super ages and is like becoming an imitation of his mother, who was a previous victim of his that he used to fuel his telepathic. Oh, wait, sorry. That's the fifth season episode, Violations, with which I confused this.
Oh, no.
Okay. This week, Picard and the gang are in the market to buy a wormhole. There's one on offer from the people of Barzan 2, who think they have the only stable wormhole ever discovered in these pre-Deep Space Nine days. But there's competition, with different races bidding for the wormhole. The Federation is one of the bidders, but the Federation negotiator is poisoned, and Riker has to fill in for him. The people who poisoned him are another group of bidders, the Ferengi. Yet a third bidder is a human named Devinoni Ral, who is representing a race we never see. Ral starts to put the moves on Deanna Troi, and he has intimate relations with her. He also reveals that he's actually a quarter betazoid, and this gives him his empathic powers that he uses to manipulate people in his negotiations. Meanwhile, Captain Picard has sent Geordi and Data to go through the wormhole in a shuttle, and two Ferengi do the same. Geordi and Data discover that the wormhole is not as stable as it appears, and as a result of their irrational obstinance, the two Ferengi are lost in the Delta Quadrant, but don't worry because they'll be back in Star Trek Voyager. Meanwhile, on our side of the wormhole, the Barzans conclude a deal with Devinoni Ral on behalf of his mysterious employers. Riker wasn't willing to conclude a deal before we knew whether the wormhole was stable, but Ral was. Just then, the Ferengi stage an attack on the wormhole, which will have no effect on it. Deanna then reveals that the staged attack was staged, and she reveals that Ral has empathic powers he uses to manipulate people. The whole scene we just watched was staged by Ral and the Ferengi to manipulate the Barzans, but now his deception is exposed, and Ral's employers are stuck with his deal for the bum wormhole. In the end, Ral asks Deanna to go with him and help him reform, but she says she already has a job as a counselor. The end.
Oh, burn. Father, what did you think of this episode?
You know, I liked the thing about the stable wormhole as a possibility. I remember seeing this way back when, before Deep Space Nine was ever out, and the idea of a stable wormhole and that different powers would try to control it, and there might be some negotiations over that. I thought was interesting. The twist at the end with with the Ferengi getting stuck in the Delta Quadrant, it was a sort of, I don't know, poetic justice or something there after some of the tactics they've used at different points. And the big thing that I've always found troubling is the relationship between Deanna Troi and Devinoni Ral, because it seems to develop out of nowhere and go very quickly. And despite her empathic abilities, she's never able to figure out that he's part betazoid himself and everything else he's doing and whatnot. But so overall, I liked it actually as an episode. It's just that one big chunk that's a little difficult, I guess.
How about you, Jimmy?
Well, I had different reactions to it in the middle of watching it because, like I said, I initially confused it with the similar fifth season episode Violations, where you have this telepathic guy come on board. He's got his ostensible mother with him who is extremely possessive of him. And then gradually that role transfers onto Deanna, and she gets telepathic Stockholm syndrome and super ages, and it's really creepy. And this is mental violence. It's like watching mental rape. And I just had such an off-putting yuck reaction to that I thought at the beginning of the episode, oh, this is that yuck episode with the guy's mom or ostensible mom. And then it's like, well, wait, where's the ostensible mom? And I figured out, oh, that's a different episode that's just based on a very similar premise. So, okay, that kind of changed my opinion, but still, like Father said, this relationship comes out of nowhere. And Deanna is falling into bed with this guy with basically no setup. That was part of why I thought it was the same episode. I thought, oh, this is part of the mental manipulation he's doing on her. Because no one would get into bed with someone that fast. That's ridiculous. But especially the creepy way he's approaching her.
So creepy.
Yeah. But setting that aside, this episode is all about capitalism and business negotiations. So I appreciate that and take that, Gene Roddenberry. However, it's the business negotiations are being done by people who are idiots, because this essentially what you have here is the Panama Canal.
Yeah. Right.
And Panama wants to just sell it to another race. What? No, if you've got a unique passageway from one point to another that makes it transportation much easier, you just charge people a user fee to go through it.
Charge a toll.
Yeah. Even if you decide to sell the whole thing, which is ridiculous, then a lot of the drama in this is generated by, or meant to be generated by, the fact that they don't know if this is for sure, if this is stable or not. And so they're building up the risk of, do we conclude a deal now before we know that? And I'm going, aren't you going to have clauses in your contract that say the deal is null and void if this turns out to not be stable? I mean,
right.
if I buy a car and it's a lemon, then okay, I get my money back and you take your bum car back. So that's part of business negotiations today. It ought to be part of business negotiations in the 24th century. So I thought, even though it's not as bad as the later episode, Devononi Rao is just a creep from the get-go.
Oh my gosh.
He manipulates other people and Deanna, and she has less of an excuse, as Father said. She doesn't notice what's going on with him emotionally. She's more beta Z than he is. She ought to recognize it easier. And it's just, even though I like the capitalistic aspects of it, they're idiots. And then we've got this big creepy plot, which is the A plot of what Devononi Rao is doing with Deanna.
Yeah, I agree. It is so cringe. It's very kind of 80s. It's, Love Boat era. I think maybe Love Boat went off the air before this, but it's very creepy. It's very, oh my gosh. I wanted to punch him in the face so often. Like he has that stupid smile. I couldn't stand the guy. It was just like, what are you doing? And putting these arrogant moves on her and stuff.
And it's not just her. He also like puts the reverse arrogant moves on Riker.
Yeah.
And he's like rubbing Riker's nose in, I'm going to take your girlfriend away from you because you're not man enough to keep her. And,
it's like the jerk at the bar, It's like, do whatever you want. I don't care. It's not my business.
Well, that's part of Riker has a nice pushback on him, because Riker effectively says, I don't care what you're going to do. And A, I don't care what you're going to do. And B, if you bring joy to her life, I think that's great. And C, I don't think you're man enough to keep her.
Well, go ahead.
The thing I found interesting with that whole exchange with him and Riker there is that, they're at a point where Riker's now negotiating on behalf of the Federation, and these are the main two competitors to get this wormhole. And so Raoul's definitely trying to get under Riker's skin. And in a sense, he's trying to provoke him. But one possible result of provoking him would be to push Riker to make an offer more quickly on this wormhole. And it seems like one of Raul's big advantages is that he's willing to make this offer before they find out the results of its stability and everything. And it seems like it'd be to his advantage to have Riker a little more timid, a little bit more hesitant to make that offer.
Maybe he's just trying to throw him off balance emotionally or something, but
that's likely.
A huge miscalculation.
Possible. Yeah. One thought I had was that maybe what he's looking for is just to figure out how aggressive Riker wants to be. Not so much that he's trying to provoke him into doing something rash or quickly, but trying to see, okay, how committed is he to the slow and steady tactics, if you will.
Right. Is he a hothead?
Is he a hothead? There you go. Yeah.
And he then wants to manipulate him into acting like a hothead by ginning up this phony battle with the Ferengi to make the Barzanis think, oh, the Federation's going to get into war and we want to go with the peaceful, mysterious employers.
They make him out to be like the greatest negotiator ever. He's really not.
He's really not. I mean, one of the whole reasons, and they didn't have to do it this way, but this is the way they did it. But one of the ways he gets to know Deanna so quickly is he skips the opening negotiation rounds, and and he says they're inconsequential, so he never participates in them. And I'm going, you idiot! If you want to form a business relationship with someone, you show interest in them from the beginning. You do not. You do not. Let other people start negotiating with them, and then you swoop in and steal the deal from people who already have established relations with the client. That's ridiculous.
Have you guys ever heard of the term negging? It's a tactic. You have these internet bros who are all about, like, I'm an expert in getting women, and they train other guys how to do it, and it's ridiculous and it's offensive to men. But they one of the tactics they talk about is negging, where women respond positively when you like, especially beautiful women who are used to men fawning over them. If you act negatively toward them, they'll want to convince you to be positive toward them, and so you neg them, and which is a tactic that Raul uses on Deanna. Like, he's like, you don't know what you want, you can't decide. It's very reminding me a lot of Khan with the crewman,
Marla MacGyver's.
Marla MacGyver, right? That whole tactic. But he's kind of uses this. He's using the same tactic in the negotiation, which is, as you say, Jimmy, is dumb, because you want to make a good first impression on the people you're trying to convince to sell you their wormhole. Like, he's terrible at everything. I mean, he kind of gets what he wants with Deanna for a while, but in the end he doesn't get what he wants, and he totally screws up the whole wormhole thing because he's presumably distracted by Deanna or what, I don't know. But yeah, it's just he's supposed to come across as this intriguing mystery figure of strength, and he just comes across as creepy, cringe, arrogant, and and I have to be honest, I kind of lose a little respect for Deanna for falling for him so quickly and contemplating, is he the one? I'm like, are you serious? Like, how could you even consider that?
If he were in telepathic control of her brain, like in Violations, okay, Deanna would have an excuse. Right.
Yeah.
But here, she's just being profoundly unwise. Now, this is, after all, an early third season episode. So, okay, we still haven't gotten all of the show's not as good as it's going to be. But this is a black mark for Deanna, I think. Although I do like when she resolves the situation at the end, where, I forget
everything.
Yeah, I forget how Raul puts it, but she acknowledges that he asked her to, on the bridge in front of everyone, she outs him. And then she says, I was asked to keep this private, which put me in an impossible position ethically. And I have now resolved my dilemma, period.
Yeah. Actually, I like the opening scene too. That also I liked how they revealed something about Deanna. She comes back to her quarters after a long, hard day. She wants to have an ice cream sundae. And then Picard, calls her
reception.
Yeah, and she's visibly annoyed at his request. And I find it actually funny and refreshing, her reaction. It feels very real. And then when she shows up, she's very professional. She's on. And I'm like, good for Deanna. Like, she has real reactions. She's, who doesn't get annoyed when their boss calls them in after hours to some stupid event that you don't really need to be at. And, then you show up but you act like professional and you're very cordial and so on and so forth. I liked that scene. That was actually a nice reveal of something about Deanna that was again, funny and refreshing.
There was a similar thing that I liked with Picard, where after they've had their initial reception and they've sat down in negotiations in the conference room, the Ferengi show up unexpectedly. And the Barzans want to let the Ferengi negotiate, and the Ferengi leader is being a total jerk. I mean, as you expect from Ferengi in this era of early on in Star Trek, and he's like obsessed with chairs. Who is going to get the chairs for us, since all the chairs at the conference table are filled up. And he just keeps going on and on and on and on about the chairs. And eventually Picard says, because Picard doesn't want to be here, Picard says, and you can have my chair. And he turns around and he walks out of the conference room. And then we get this reverse angle shot once he's gone through the door. He just sighs, and you can tell how satisfied he is that he's been able to get out of that conference room, and he just moves on. And there are no words to this, and it's all physical acting.
Yeah,
and Patrick Stewart does it really well. And this is the kind of subtlety I thought, I wouldn't have seen this in season 1 or 2. They're starting to grow,
right?
Yeah. And either on the writing level or the acting level or the directing level, but this is a kind of character subtlety we wouldn't have had before.
Yeah. I think you're right. The show has begun to kind of lean into the abilities of the actors and the directors and the audience who's come to know these characters. And I really, if there's a species that Picard really dislikes at this point, it is totally the Ferengi right from the beginning. He really just has no patience for Ferengi.
Don't worry. At the end of this season, he'll have a warmer view of the Ferengi, and he's going to really start hating the Borg.
yes. Yeah. He'll have good reason. Yeah. So one of the things I found interesting about this is there are two elements, and Memory Alpha calls it out. There are two elements to this that become the basis of two other series, a stable wormhole and getting lost in the Delta Quadrant. I just thought that was kind of a funny thing. And on that stable wormhole thing, I couldn't find anywhere where it said anything about whether the creators of Deep Space Nine ever looked to this episode's stable wormhole as an element. And because here you have this poor, resource poor planet whose only attractive resource that they have is this Panama Canal, which is basically Bajor. I just think I'm curious how much this story was the foundation for Deep Space Nine or not, but I couldn't find anything.
I've always assumed it was. I don't think it was as foundational to Voyager, right? Because that's just, I think the TV series Lost in Space was foundational to that. But I've always assumed that this episode has played an inspirational role in Deep Space Nine of, what if we did have a stable wormhole?
And I remember when Voyager first came out, one of my first thoughts was, "Ooh, I wonder if they'll ever bump into those two Ferengi who got lost with the wormhole situation."
Which they do in the third season Voyager episode, False Prophets. Yeah. The other interesting thing is, we know why Bajor is resource poor, because the planet was basically strip mined by the Cardassians. But why are the Barzan resource poor? We don't have any sense of what caused it. And if the planet is just naturally resource poor, so poor that they must, rely on these other civilizations, how does they say we have no resources, no natural resources. They literally use that term. No natural resources? Like, how does a civilization develop on such a planet?
It doesn't. That's clearly hyperbole.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
They also had a thing, they said the negotiations were taking place on the Enterprise because their planet is inhospitable to other forms of life.
That's why they're wearing those breather units around their mouths.
Yeah.
If that looks familiar, we do meet another Barzan later on, although in the past from TNG on Discovery. In the second season, it's Commander Nahan. I think she was originally an engineer and eventually became security chief. So we do actually learn more about the Barzan, and we actually learn more about the Barzan culture in later seasons of Discovery. But that's if you're wondering why is that so familiar, that's again, this show inspired so many other elements of Star Trek for such a bad episode. The funny thing that gets me is
I do say I like another thing. I like the breather units on the Barzani. That's something that makes sense, and it's nice to have that as an element here.
The other things that this show did was it established the idea that the galaxy is divided into 4 quadrants, or at least that's how they politically divided in their minds. Of course, the galaxy is the galaxy, whether they divided it or not.
Although they later, and this I think originated in the maps, but they later stupidly place the boundary between the alpha and the beta quadrant in the dumbest place imaginable.
Through the middle of the Federation.
Through the middle of Earth's solar system.
Yeah.
So they just draw a line between the galactic core, between Sagittarius A star and Sol. And that means Earth spends half of its year in the alpha quadrant and half of its year in the beta quadrant. That's like, nobody's going to do that. What you do is you draw a line between Sagittarius A star and the Federation's most important planet, Earth, and then that's the center of the alpha quadrant, not the edge of the alpha quadrant. But apparently the people involved in Star Trek know less about cartography than they do dialogue, and so they did it the dumb way.
That always bothered me. So let's see. Another interesting plot element is this woman who is on Devanani Ral's arm at the opening reception, who then disappears. Like, we get an explanation. He sent her away, but all it does is make Ral less likable, even more unlikable if possible. I don't understand what the point of this non-speaking character was, to establish him as like, a dude who can have beautiful women. Yeah.
That was another thing that confused me, because I thought, there's his mom and she's going to horribly age and then she'll pass her off as his mom.
Right.
But they didn't do that. She just vanishes from the show.
Yeah. Just so many weird things with him, like the playing with her hair and grabbing her by the neck and, in her office. And that's sort of
Deanna.
Yeah. Sorry, Deanna.
In fact, as I was watching this to prepare for our recording today, someone was watching it with me for the first at least little bit, and when Raul is in there in Deanna's office playing with her hair and everything, my friend said, "Oh, these two characters have known each other for a while, I guess." And I said, "No, actually, they just met a couple minutes ago, and that was the note I just wrote. Is that this is weird how fast this thing is moving."
Yes, and he does say, "Am I moving too fast for you?" Yes. Yes. Or, later on, the dialogue is so overwrought in these intimate moments, at the negotiating table, it can be fatal to have a heart. I never knew how much I needed mine until I looked at you. I'm like, gag me. Like, that is just so, overdone. Just terrible dialogue. I'm sorry. But
another bit of writing flaw in this is one of the key moments in the plot is we never see, because the Federation has sent this guy named Mendoza, I think, to do the negotiations. Yeah, and they want to get him out of the way so they can force one of our regular cast into that role. So Riker is going to have to take it over, and Picard can't, even though he is a negotiator, he can't take this because he's hosting the whole conference. So he has to stay, which is dumb. But he has to stay neutral ostensibly, so it falls to Riker. And so we see the Ferengi, being evil and putting this untraceable biotoxin on the hand of one of the Ferengi.
Goss, I think, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a Dr. Ferengi who's come up with this, and it's based on the carrier's own DNA. So it will pass a biofilter when they beam him over to the Enterprise. And it's like, okay, this is all very clever. I'm fine with this. So the idea is he's going to shake hands with the human negotiator, and that's going to cause a violent allergic reaction. Okay, that's all fine. We never see the handshake.
Nope.
It happens off screen. And if you're investing all this concept stuff in getting this, here's how you're going to get this character to cease being a negotiator, we need to see the fatal handshake.
Right.
Even if it's just for 15 seconds, you see, hello, Mr. Mendoza. Good to see you again. That's all you need. Yeah. And we don't get it.
It's like they were trying to do one of those clever filmography things, or, film directing where, we see the prep and we see the result, but, we have to leave the rest to your imagination. And it's like, I mean, that can work in very specific circumstances. It feels missing here. Just weird.
It would almost have been better to see the handshake and not see the dialogue with the Ferengi doctor prepping the poison and everything, and kind of lead us wondering, okay, how did they do that? What was going on there? That sort of thing.
Right. Or just, you don't even need the scene where, Mendoza's staggering down the hall. You just have him in sickbay, later on, yeah. One of the weird things was, so Geordi and Data take the little shuttle pod to the other side of the wormhole, and they're there for like days, because there's so much time passes. So there are so many scenes on the Enterprise before they come back. It's like they were like over there forever. I feel like the director kind of lost track of them. And maybe because they need to have the resolution of the wormhole moves later in the story, then plausibly they would spend that so much time over there in this tiny little pod. I think they just kind of wrote themselves into a corner where they had to, hope we don't realize that Data and Geordi are stuck in this pod for 2 days on the other side of the wormhole.
If that's what they were hoping, it worked with me. I didn't think that much time had gone by on the Enterprise, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. Because there were Deanna and Raul had several dates, a dinner invitation, and it was hours, at least 12 hours, 24 hours at some point. So,
and it looked like they took the smallest possible shuttlecraft.
Yes, they did. That's the tiny pod. I wouldn't take a tiny pod to the other side of the galaxy. No. If there's even the slightest possibility that we get stuck there. I want the biggest shuttle with all of the supplies.
Right. I like the line where Geordi makes the comment about the possibility of something not working and them getting stuck over there. They said, well, look on the bright side. You would have me to talk to the whole time. And Geordi just kind of,
makes you wonder if Data's being a little self-aware there.
Right.
So there was some interesting dialogue between Raul and Deanna. There is a scene where she confronts him about using his empathic ability in the negotiations, and he calls her out on her double standard. I use my negotiations for my employers, so you use it to help your crew. And she's like, oh, but that's a matter of life and death. And he says, Now it's a matter of life and death when you take advantage. Me, I deal in property exchanges. Nobody gets hurt. So you tell me, which one of us would you say has more of a problem with ethics? You use it. He's accusing her of using it to help the Federation overcome enemies in a battle or life and death situation. He's just using it in business negotiations where nobody's life is in danger.
He also points out, you don't announce to every race you meet that you have these abilities either. You're hiding too.
Right. Exactly.
I thought that was a good sequence for him where when he's not being creepy, he's got some good points.
Right. He also says, the point of negotiations is to take.
This is why telepaths should be required to wear a badge indicating they're a telepath around normals.
That's right, just like on Babylon 5. So he says the point of negotiations is to take advantage, like you use all of your advantages to overcome the other side in negotiations. I don't know what the other side is offering, and they don't know what I'm offering, so we dance around until someone wins, and I never cry foul when I lose. Like he recognizes that some you win, some you lose. And again, to his credit, he doesn't, blubber at the end of he recognizes he was bested. He lost the not fair and square, because it wasn't fair and square, but he does lose a negotiation and doesn't complain about it. I always honor my deals, he says. I'm not sure the Chrysalians will all be all that happy with him honoring his deals or not. But
well, it's not really up to him. It's up to the Chrysalians. Are they going to honor the deal he made on their behalf?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. They do break a little bit of the lore, because in other episodes involving the Ferengi, Deanna has said, I can't sense, you can't read, Betazoids can't read Ferengi minds.
Right.
But she does in this one. And I think later on, especially in DS9, Luoxana reads Quark, I think.
Does she?
Or she might say, I think in DS9 she says she does, but I think she's bluffing at him.
One thing about Betazoid powers is they are very inconsistent.
Yes.
Yes.
They
work at the speed of plot.
Yeah. And they have, early on, it's, I can't actually, since I'm only half Betazoid, I can't actually read anybody's thoughts, but I can sense their emotions. Mm-hmm. And then she's saying things like, Captain, I sense considerable deception on their part. And I'm going, no, deception is not an emotion. You should not be able to sense that. You could sense he's nervous or that he's excited or something like that, but you can't sense deception.
So
by the way, I do not really advocate telepaths having to wear a badge.
I had caught as well this thing about the Betazoids being able to read Ferengi, or not being able to read. I want to say it's later on in Next Generation that they first bring that up, that the Ferengi brain is shaped in a certain way that Betazoids can't read it. But I think it was actually later in this same season, as later in season 3 that they say that. And so it's like, wow, couldn't we be consistent at least within the same season?
Yeah.
No, because they were scrambling to get scripts done.
Yeah.
I think it was in that episode, again, with Luoxana, where they're kidnapped by the... so this was episode 8, and the one where that came up was in Menage a Troi.
Yeah, that was
a terrible name. That was episode 24. So at the end of the
16
season,
episodes after this one. Yeah.
The
other thing that's kind of discontinuity is the Ferengi, when they first shows up on the Enterprise, brings a big bag of gold. And they say later on in Deep Space Nine that gold is worthless. You need the gold pressed platinum to really be worth something.
Right. Maybe they didn't know it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a small thing, and I haven't seen anyone else talk about it, so maybe it's just my eyes, but have you noticed that there were a number of scenes where the camera was out of focus on the primary character who was speaking? There were several scenes, including in the climactic bridge scene at the end, like where Picard was out of focus as he's talking. And I'm like, my eyes go, like people behind him were in focus, but I hadn't seen anybody talk about it online. So I don't know whether it's me or not. It's if folks go watch this episode, let me know if it's just my eyes or not. I mean, maybe I can go back and rewatch some of those scenes, but it was really weird, but it just felt sloppy. Again, this very inconsistent episode, which has some good things and a lot of bad things. It's kind of a mediocre. And I was a little surprised to see how often in the Memory Alpha talks about how often people said, "Oh, this was a great episode. This was one of the best Deanna episodes." I'm like, really? It makes Deanna look terrible.
Yeah.
And then
having an episode focus on a character who's often neglected is not the same thing as showing that character in a good light.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's the weird working out scene, which I'm not sure what the point of that was, except to have Beverly and Deanna in slinky outfits.
In fact, I encountered that early on because I was trying to think the price. Which one is that?
Yeah.
And so I Googled like next gen the price, and okay, it's an episode that has Dr. Beverly and Deanna working out in leotards. And because that's like one of the most memorable images from this in the imagination of the internet, apparently.
Yeah. I was a young man, and it apparently made an impression on me because that's one of the things I remembered about this episode too. Yeah, really, it was very.
I remember that scene. I just didn't remember. Oh, it's in the price.
Yeah. It's just a lot of weird things. I don't know. It's just about this episode.
At least
any other
ghosts involved with for any romantic entanglements?
See, that's the thing, is that beats this for cringe. Like this, just not even on the same planet. Yeah.
Well, what you'll notice, and I was going to mention earlier, I hate all of the episodes that involve Loxana and romance, except for the one where she and Odo are trapped in an elevator. That was
the one we just talked about. Yeah, the Forsaken.
But all the rest of them I hate. So what this shows us is romance and Star Trek don't mix. if you're going to be doing it as a single episode, where you have to get them into and out of a relationship in the same episode. If it's Deep Space Nine and these are character arcs where you have Cassidy Yates or Jadzia and Worf,
right?
Okay, I'm here for that.
Rom and Lita.
Yeah, Rom and Lita. Yeah, absolutely. But these episodic, you got to fall in and out of love in an episode. It's like, no, just don't do that. That always is terrible.
Right.
Like Riker and the holographic girl and
Minuet. Yeah.
Minuet. Yeah. Those were all very, it just doesn't work. And Geordi and
his date of the week.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking Leah Brahms.
There you go.
Which both episodes, that just does not work. Poor Geordi.
Even in Voyager at the very end when they had Chakotay and Seven, that sort of came out of nowhere. That always felt
that was weird.
Yeah.
One that I thought actually had potential on Next Gen was Worf and Deanna. And Michael Dorn had advocated for that, or at least thought it was a good idea. Marina Sirtis did not like it. And she thought, well, I'm supposed to end up with Riker. And then they're having Worf. And I at the time I said, no, Marina Sirtis is not understanding this. This is Beauty and the Beast. This is good. This is good. Yeah. This has potential. But then when I rewatched, it's like, and that's in one episode. That's in the series finale. So they introduced it right at the end and didn't have the potential to explore it. Now he then goes off to Deep Space Nine and meets Jadzia, and that's great.
Sure.
But there was potential with Troi and Deanna, with Troi and Worf, which is again 2 main cast members having a romance as opposed to a visitor of the week.
And came up in a very funny way in the 3rd season of Picard, which it was funny that when they brought that up. Any other notes on this one, Father?
Nope. I think we covered them all.
How about you, Jimmy? Anything else?
Nope.
Very good. Then let's move on to our feedback. Very quick. This was on our discussion of the Section 31 movie, and Nicholas on Spotify writes, "This was not Star Trek. It, as with Discovery, was made by people that don't understand Star Trek and are trying to make it something it is not." What do you guys think about that? Does it not Star Trek?
Well, de gustibus non est disputandum. So, there's to be no disputing about tastes. I think a better candidate for someone who doesn't understand Star Trek trying to make it and failing is the J.J. Abrams movies. When I watch the first one, it's like, this is Star Wars.
Yes.
That is what J.J. Abrams understands and likes is Star Wars. And he's wanting to do Star Wars. This was before he did the 2 sequel movies. but he's wanting to do Star Wars, and he's doing it skinned with Star Trek. And especially in the second of the J.J. Abrams movies, where you have like Kirk and Spock are jumping between starships with these hyper fast, blazingly fast spacewalks between.
Yeah.
It's just, this is stunt spectacle. This is not what Star Trek is about. So I think that the Section 31 movie, I can see it as a reasonable extrapolation of what we saw of Section 31 in Deep Space Nine. But not everyone may agree.
I think because it lacked a lot of the trappings of Star Trek that we have come to know and understand in, 13 movies and 7 series or whatever it is now. The starships, Starfleet, all those. We hadn't have any of that. And so I feel, and so maybe that just felt like, oh, we're it doesn't feel like Star Trek without all those things. And I can understand that. I mean, you want, when you love a thing, you may want the things that make it seem like that. Like if, what would Star Wars be without the Force and Jedi? And well, we actually kind of got that a few times. sometimes it was good and sometimes it wasn't. Mm-hmm. But it's I get that. I get that feeling, and I think maybe some of that is informed by feelings about Discovery. Without, if we didn't have the problem of Discovery, maybe there would be better reception for Section 31 for some people. I think that's a part of it, maybe as well.
Yeah. Father, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, again, the Section 31 movie wasn't my favorite, but at the same time, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's not really Star Trek. I mean, I think it does build on the character of Emperor Giorgio. It does build on Section 31 as it was originally introduced in Deep Space Nine and as it's been mentioned before. And I don't think it's inconsistent with any of that. So I would not put it in the category of non-Star Trek by any means.
Right.
Yeah.
And
but
it didn't have
different people may have different mileage.
Sure, absolutely. Right. Yeah.
And it didn't have a lot of the agenda-driven content that, say, Discovery had, which separated her from Discovery, which is good.
I mean, it's been said before, sometimes that, I guess in the original series, on the original first few movies, the Enterprise itself was one of the characters. And you can say that, you look at the other series, that the ship is very important. And you don't have an important ship in the Section 31 movie.
No.
You get the garbage scow at the end, but there's no... Do they even say the name of it? I don't remember if there was a name for it.
No.
They could build that up, though. I kind of like the idea of a garbage scow being an important ship.
I mean, even Picard, you had, for 2 seasons, you had, what's his name? The Serena, yeah. Which, again, an important ship. And then finally, the Titan Enterprise G.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're right. All right. Well, thank you, Nicholas, for your feedback. We really appreciate giving the opportunity to discuss the proposal you made there in your feedback. Now, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Star Trek, including Patrick, Mike and Angie G, Charles J, Father Jeff H, and Mary B. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What did you think of the price? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek or our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Send an email to trek@sqpn.com or visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. You can also watch The Secrets of Star Trek on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia, where, of course, you should leave a comment, like, subscribe. We'll be back next time. Speaking of Worf and Deep Space Nine, we'll be back next time discussing the Sword of Kahless on Deep Space Nine. And so until then, Father Jason Tyler, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Star Trek.
Thanks, Dom.
And Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thank you, and kapla!
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, but I was tense. I was ready to blow it up.